All right, good afternoon. As always, I'm going to assume that when I talk about something that the screen share that I'm showing you is on your screen. So if it's not, you can let me know if you would, please. This is the email I literally just sent out minutes ago to everybody. And it says today we'll go over some Node.js stuff and some MySQL stuff, and that's what we're going to do. All right, I've created a GitHub where repo where I just threw a bunch of junk out there for you. And there's the URL for it. So if you want to go and copy that down, that would be a good idea. All right. Now, I do want to explain to you, and I don't know if this is going to sound a little flippy or what, but we're going to actually be working on two different things this week, but eventually they'll join together. I mean, so again, just imagine that we're taking two different roads, and once we get to a certain point in those roads, they're going to merge into one road. So that's what we are going to do. I'm going to give you some node stuff today, and we're going to get to a certain point, and then I'm going to go give you some MySQL stuff today, and we're going to get to a certain point. My hope is by the end of this week, we will be working on a project that will be using Node.js along with MySQL, and we'll literally write our own RESTful API, just so you've got an idea of where we're going to. All right. Now, before I do anything, and this is going to involve me doing a screen share, I get it. I found a lot of different articles in here that talked about, where is it? Come on, Jeffrey. There. About APIs. This one was probably about as good as anything else I found. So hopefully what you see on your screen right now is what is RESTful API. Now, my guess is this may have been written by somebody where English wasn't their first language, because we would typically say, what is a RESTful API? But it doesn't matter. All right. So it says here, it's an interface that two computer systems use to exchange information securely over the internet. In a nutshell, that's what it is. What we're going to want to be able to do eventually is to go out to public APIs, so APIs that are out on the internet, grab information that's out there, bring it into our own program, and use it basically in our own programs. All right. Now, there's more to it than that. That's usually working with an open or an existing API, a third-party API. It's also possible, totally legitimate, for you to create your own API. We're going to start doing that this week as well. Now, again, I don't want to sit and read to you, but if you take a look at what's in here, I've given you this kind of analogy before, where I've said that in many ways, an API or an application program interface is like a contract between you and some software. The software agrees to provide certain services to you, and in return, you agree to utilize and use those services in the way they're supposed to be being used. So in that case, you are basically the client here. You're the one who wants to access that information. All right. As far as resources, as it says, it's the information that different applications provide to their clients. What is ending up happening today is more and more companies are putting tons of stuff out there for people to utilize, reference, etc., for free. Now, not all of it's for free, and you can't always do everything on it for free. I'm not going to go out there right now, but as an example, if I went out to the Open Weather API right now, what you'd see is I can go out there and I can grab a ton of information for free. Won't cost me a penny. However, if I'm going to go and create, Jeff's weather site, where literally, I'm going to be competing with the Weather Channel, let's say. I realize that's a little goofy, but you get the idea. Then It's not going to be free, because if I have thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of people going to my website in order to try to get information, no API is going to give all that stuff out for free. So when you start working with it, with the stuff that we're doing, all right, the number of hits we're going to have on anything we create is going to be so small that we will be able to use the free version of whatever APIs we're going to go out to. All right. So the next thing they talk about in here is what is REST. And as it says, it's an architecture that imposes conditions upon the way that an API should work. All right. Well, basically, there are a set of rules that you're supposed to follow, for lack of better words. It says API developers can design APIs using several different architectures. So in other words, when you go in and start to create your own API, there's basically a bunch of different ways that you can do it. All right. So they talk in here first about a uniform interface, and you can see these 4 constraints that they put out there. Number 1, requests should identify resources. So it should be real obvious what you're going to provide to somebody who's going to use your API. So what resources are you going to make available? For instance, in the example I just gave you with open weather, they give you things like temperature, highs and lows of the day, chance of precipitation, etc. All right. So it says the server meets these kinds of conditions by sending metadata that describes the resource further. All right. Number 3, clients receive information about how to process the representation further. Usually what that's going to mean is you will get information back probably in JSON format. And then if you want to actually put it on a web page, then you will have to run through the different JSON commands to take that JSON and convert it over to HTML. All right. Finally, number 4, clients receive information about all other related resources they need to complete a task. Well, one thing also to realize is different companies have different kinds of tiers as far as what they set up for you. Most companies will allow you to look at certain information for free, as long as I mentioned before, as long as you don't have too many people banging on you, grabbing that information at one time. But the more information that you want, there's also a chance that they could be charging money for it. Now, not so much on a weather type of thing, but let's just say that I'm going to go and access possibly, let's say, like Menards or something like that. Do they have an API? My guess is that they do. I've never gone and looked. But there might be certain amount of information that after we get to a certain point that they're like, hey, we're not going to provide that information for free anymore. You've grabbed too much. We're going to start charging you. All right. Next, statelessness. Says in a REST architecture, statelessness refers to a communication method in which the server completes every client request independently from all other previous requests. Guess what? That's pretty much the way the web works. That unless you go in and you're working on a website and you set up things like sessions, if I go out, let's say, for example, if I go out to Amazon and I'm out there and I put a book into my shopping cart, and then I go out to Amazon maybe on another computer and put another book into another shopping cart, even though they're both from me, there's at least a chance that it's going to be looked at as 2 different types of requests. Now, not always. It might put both those books or whatever into the same shopping cart. All right. But all I'm trying to tell you is when you talk about statelessness, you've already been working with that. In many ways, you can look at it that the server is kind of a stupid machine, that it just gets request after request after request, and it doesn't care who's making those requests. It just responds to the requests. Okay. Next, layered system. And as it says, the client can connect to other authorized intermediaries between the client and the server. Guess what? We have looked at that before. And if you say, no, we haven't, yes, we have. You know, when we look back near the beginning of the AWD1111 class, and we looked, I believe there was a picture, I'm not going to bring it up, but in the Muroc book, where they said that sometimes when you make a request, all right, to a server at a company, let's just say it's Rankin, all right, and let's say that I want to get a transcript, let's say I'm a student there, and I want to make, go out to Rankin's website, and I want to request an official copy of my transcripts. I don't know if you can do that or not. It doesn't matter. But the point is, the Rankin server that serves my request coming in probably will not have an official copy of my transcript available on it. Rather, it'll have to call another server to get that information, return it to the main server, which will format it into HTML and send it back to me. That's kind of what they're talking about here too. All right. And finally, RESTful web service support caching, the process of storing some responses on the client to improve server response time. I'm not going to sit there and read what they say to you. But the idea with caching is, at least at times when you go out to a website, so let's say I go out to the Open API and I go out and maybe I start to grab some information, or maybe it's as simple as grabbing the temperature. Well, what may happen is the Open Weather API may end up caching for me all the information that's in there, thinking that I might want to go back shortly and I might want to grab additional information, not just the temperature. Now, the big thing with caching, and you've all seen this kind of thing before, all right, that when you cache, depending on where you're caching, how you're caching, etc., you don't want things typically, if you're working in a real-time sensitive environment, you don't want things to be, for lack of better words, what's the word I'm looking for? To be stale. You don't want the information to get old. So for instance, all right, if let's just say that you followed that shooting that took place in Highland Park on the 4th of July. Well, if you were doing this in a RESTful way, they would constantly be having the equivalent of a blog, and they would constantly be updating it. So when you went out there, you wouldn't be getting information from an hour ago, all right? You would be getting information from 5 minutes ago, but they would be caching all of the older information as well. So if you wanted to read down the thread and figure out everything that was going on, you could. All right. Finally, code on demand here, it says servers can temporarily extend or customize client functionality by transferring software programming code to the client. You may or may not have heard of these terms before, but the more power that you give to the client, that means the fatter the client and the thinner the server. And if you reverse it, the more power you give the server and the less you give the client, it's a thin client and a thick server. So again, you can have, any combination thereof. All right. So why do you want to use APIs? And they mention in here, they can provide scalability. Okay. They provide flexibility. They provide independence. All right. And I would say that all of these are important. All right. So how do they work? As it says there, the basic function is the same as browsing the internet. You, the client, contact the server by using the API, typically by putting in some kind of an address into the address bar. All right. And then these are the steps. The client sends a request to the server. What you're going to find when we start working with Node in a lot of depth is that's going to be known as REQ. Okay. Number 2, the server authenticates the client and confirms that the client has the right to make that request. What does that mean? That typically means, for example, if we were going to go out to the Open Weather API, we couldn't just start doing a lot of different work as far as making a lot of requests. all right? Especially if we wanted to do that programmatically. What we'd have to do is we would have to go and request an API key, all right? API keys are typically given for free, and quite often you're given two API keys. One is a public one that you can share with the world. One is a private one that should only be known by you. All right. Number three, as it says, the server receives the request, and as long as you've been authorized, it processes it internally. Number four, it returns a response. So we're going to have REQ is going to be our request, and RES is going to be our response. As it says, that response contains information that's going to have a lot of information. It's going to have data, and it may also have things like a status, like 200 saying that your request was okay, like 400, which would say you did something wrong, like maybe you brought up a non-existent or asked for something non-existent and you got a 404 error. You can also get 500 level errors where the error is not on your end, but it's on the server end. So as it says, the REST API request and response details vary slightly depending on basically how they're set up. All right, so what does this client request contain? All right, and as it says there, the first thing that's there is a URI. Most people get confused over what a URI is. All right, technically, a URL is a type of URI. In other words, all right, as it says there, a URL is similar to a website address that you enter into the browser. Okay, but it's weird because depending on what you're working with, sometimes URIs literally point off into space and they're not connected to anything, where a URL must be, otherwise you're going to get an error. All right, so when we start working with these things, we're going to be using software that we're going to be downloading shortly, and we're going to be doing typically one of these four things with it. When you look at this, it may look at least somewhat like CRUD, and it's similar to CRUD. A get is going to be similar to a select, but there's going to be two types of gets. We can use a straight get, which says, show me all the data you've got, or we can use get followed by a slash after the get and an ID. So if I only want to see one record and it's record one, I can do a get /1. Whereas if I just do a get and there's 50 records, it's going to show me all 50. The next one is post. And a get request looks pretty much just like a post request, except where a get request is accessing resources from a server, a post request is sending data to a server. But when you actually create these and you do an app.get or an app.post, at times at least, they're going to look really similar to one another. All right. Then there's a put. A put is used, basically, it's used for updating. And there's two types of puts. There's a put and a patch. You don't have to worry about them for right now. All right. And finally, there's a delete, which is what you think it would be. Now, typically, when you send a delete request, just like with a get, you will send typically an ID with it. Because if you send a delete request without an ID, what you're telling it is you want to delete everything. And that's typically not what you're going to want to have happen. And again, as it says, you've got to have the proper authentication in order to be able to do that. All right. So when you start sending this stuff, these are going to be HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol, or secure HTTPS calls that you're going to be making. All right. And as it says, there's going to be header information in there. That header information is going to have metadata that's passed back and forth between the client and the server. Do you have to worry about that? Depends on what you may or may not want to do with it. All right, so as it says there, for data, It says REST API requests might include data for post, put, etc. Parameters, it might include information that you need in order to satisfy the request. All right. The authentication, as it says there, a RESTful web service must authenticate requests before it sends a response. We've talked about this before. You authenticate and then you authorize based on that authentication. All right. And as mentioned there, a RESTful API has 4 common authentication methods. HTTP authentication. All right. Probably the simplest type. API key authentication. Something called OAuth. All right, which takes it a little bit further. And I was looking at that. It said there's 4 basic bearer keys and OAuth, I think, are the 4. All right, and then finally on this, what does the RESTful server response contain? Well, it can contain a lot of things, including a status code. All right, now most of the time when you ask for something and it comes back successfully, most of the time you don't include a 200 response. You can, and at times you will want to. All right, but that basically said everything worked. Everything was all right. Okay, where you're typically going to want to send a status code is, as it says right here, whether if it's a 400 level or, as I mentioned to you, a 500 level. All right. So the response body, as it says, contains the resource representation. It's got the information that typically you are looking for. And again, most often it is going to be returned in a JSON or JSON-like format. What you'll notice in a couple weeks or in a week, whenever it is, when we get into talking about MongoDB, is when you actually put data into a MongoDB database, it's not going to look that different from this. All right, it's going to look like JSON. It's actually a special type of JSON called BSON, which stands for binary JSON. All right, but just so you're aware of that. So again, you can get the status line, the body with your information, and some header information, if indeed you want that. So that was quick, but I wanted you to at least see that. All right. What we're going to do next, and as I mentioned to you already, it's going to seem in a way like we're jumping back and forth and we're going down non-parallel paths, etc. You'll have to, for lack of better words, you're going to have to take my word for it that it'll all come together. All right. So this is what we're going to do. And I realize you might not even see anything on the screen right now. That's totally fine. All right. What I want you to do, let me see, I'm going to bring up like this. All right. What I'm going to want you to do then, as I change my share again, and I'll change it again fairly quickly, and that is I want you to go to your desktop. In fact, you know what? Before you even do that, all right, because I want you to see how slick this can work. So we're going to go to the desktop, but before we do, please go out to your browser, all right, and I will as well. So please go out to your browser right now, and let me open up my browser window in here. All right, and please go out to GitHub. All right, and under GitHub, I want you to create a new repository. All right. Now we can call this anything we want. It doesn't matter. All right. But I want you, if you would please, to just call it one word and run it together. First, whoops, don't know what I did there. Try that again. Select an owner. And first node project. This literally will be the first node project that we are about to create. You won't have to turn it in, but I want to run through a few things with you because my hope is at least it'll make a little bit of sense to you as we start to run through it and as we start to do things that are a little bit more complex. All right, so first node project, you're not turning it in. You can leave it public or make it private. It's up to you. I don't care about a README. We're going to be adding eventually our own git-ignore files. All right, and we will add our own licensing. So just click Create Repository. And that should create the repository for you. And if you would, in that thing that comes up, grab the line that says Git Remote Add Origin. Grab that one line and copy it to your clipboard, please. All right. Then, as I started to say earlier, then go out to your desktop. So I can stop that share and start a new one. So go out to your desktop. Oh, where is it here? Come on, Jeff. There we go. All right. And on your desktop, go add a new folder and call it exactly the same name as what we just did. So call it First Node Project. All right. First Node Project. And you don't have to put anything at all into it right now, except I do want you to open it. All right. I want you to open it. I want you to right mouse click on it. Choose your Git Bash here. And just do a git init. I know you can't see all that, but we've done enough git inits where I don't think that's going to be a big issue for anybody. All right, and that makes the .git folder for you, right? Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to bring up that first node project folder inside of Visual Studio Code. So please do that right now. Now I'm going to do it a little bit differently, and I know you can't see this, but I'm going to CMD and I'm going to CD to my desktop / first node project, and I'm going to do a code dot to bring that up. And as soon as that comes up, and it is up now, I'm going to change my share, so I'm going right to it. And again, as I'm going through this, I'm asking this, and only answer if it's in the negative. Can anyone not see an empty Visual Studio Code screen right now? Can anybody not see that? All right, then it sounds like you can. Now we're doing this differently because we're going to start writing server-side code. So what I want you to do is under your first node project, we're going to create a file. And it's not going to be index.html. We're going to type in here app.js. We're not even going to put anything into it for now, but we're going to add app.js. Okay? And again, as we go through this, if I'm saying or doing something where either I lose my my share or my share isn't what you're seeing, etc., please, by all means, stop me right away. All right? Now, the next thing that we're going to do, I'm going to, again, sorry that I keep changing my share, but I'm going to, and that is you don't have to change yours. All right? You don't have to change yours, but I want to go back to the internet, and I have found on there, where is it? There. All right. So somewhere on here in my mess, there it is. I have found a 2-minute long presentation that tells you if you want to change your default terminal that comes up under Visual Studio Code. If you want to change that from PowerShell, which it is by default, if you want to change it from PowerShell to Git Bash, which I'd recommend, this is a 2-minute, 42-second long video that tells you how to do that. I am going to play that right now. You do.
Mr. Scott, I don't think there's any audio coming through the video
Okay.
on our end.
All right. No, that's not good. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, because I want to make sure. Let me watch the next 20 seconds, because I want to make sure that I'll just tell you, but I want to make sure I'm doing it right. Let me watch his next 20 seconds, then I'll come back. Thank you. Well, I hope that I'm going to be telling you this right, but we're going to all find out together right now. So let me go back into VS Code, which means I have to change my share. All right. Hopefully you can all see this now on VS Code. All right. So I'd like you to hold down on the shift key, hold down on the control key, and tap the letter P. Control Shift P. And it should bring up something that looks like this. All right. And what do we type in then? We type in. So Control Shift P. And the first one that comes up there is terminal, select default profile. Again, if you don't see that, you're going to have to say something to me. Control Shift P, and it's blue and it says format document, but underneath it, it says terminal select default profile. If you choose that, one of the ones that should be there is Git Bash. It's the first one I have. It should actually be there for all of you. There's other ways that you can reset it if for some reason you don't see it or that doesn't work. And what I will do is I will put a link to this 2-minute and 42-second presentation that's on YouTube. I will add that out when I give you the email for today. So if you had any problem, you can do that. But if you choose Git Bash, that's literally all you have to do. Now, to make sure that it worked, what you should be able to do then is from here, inside of Visual Studio Code, you should be able to click View, and right down near the bottom, click Terminal. And down here on the bottom, it should have your terminal. And this should be the same kind of prompt that you get with Git. So again, if for some reason that did not work, in fact, I'll tell you what I'll do is we're going to take our first break in about 15 minutes. I will email you that YouTube presentation. Like I said, it's the best one I found. He's not the best speaker, but he's does a very good job in a very short amount of time. All right. So in a couple minutes, we're going to run the file that we put in here, and we're going to run it from down here. All right. If I'm saying something that, like I said, if my screen looks totally different than yours, or I'm saying or doing something that doesn't make sense, please stop me. All right. So the next thing that we're going to do, and we don't really have to do it this way, but I wanted to show you something. We're going to put in a command. So please put in this command, do not hit enter. I want you to type in npm I express, but please do not yet hit enter. All right, what we are about to do when we hit enter is a bunch of stuff is going to happen. All right. In fact, I'm trying to show you this in the most intuitive way possible. So we'll change the order on this. Okay. Just go ahead and backspace over that. If you already hit enter, it won't hurt anything. But we're going to do this. We're going to type in npm init. What that is going to do is it's going to set up a special file in here in just a minute. It's a JSON file, so if you've never worked with JSON before, you will now. All right? Now, after a while, when you start, it's going to ask you about 10 to 15 questions. And after a while, you're like, geez, I don't even want to be asked this garbage. So don't you do this. But if you want to type in npm init and have it select every default, all right, but there's some things we don't want the default for, you could put npm init -y. And that'll basically create a package.json file that will almost be empty. We don't want that. All right. Instead, we want to do it from here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this terminal that's down here and I'm going to drag up here and make it bigger. So I'm making my Visual Studio Code window smaller and I'm making my window with my terminal in it bigger. So I typed in npm init and I'm going to now hit enter. All right. Now you can read this, but what it's telling you is it's going to create for you a file called package.json. All right. And the first thing it's asking you here is, it's telling you I'm going to create a package. All right. And what name do you want it to use? By default, it uses the same name as the folder for your project. There should never be a reason to change that. So we're just going to hit enter. All right. Now it says, what version of this do you want? I've looked online and you can find different things as far as what people think this version means. Some people think what you should put in there is the version of NodeJS you are using. I don't agree with that. I think this is the version of the project that you are about to create. So this is version 1, all right, 0.0.0. So that's fine. So I'm going to hit enter again. Now it asks for a description. You technically don't have to put anything in there at all. But we're just going to put down, this is my first Node.js project. If you want to, you can leave it blank. It's not going to hurt anything. You can also add it later, and I'm going to show you how to do that in just a couple minutes. So hit enter again. Now it asks for the entry point. This is why I asked you to create a file called app.js. If we did not have a file at all in there, it would default to index.js, which isn't terrible. You could still type app.js in here or whatever. And if for some reason I did not want my entry point to be app.js, I could type something else in here. But app.js is what I want. So we hit enter again. All right. The next thing that's in there has to do if you are working and doing some testing with this. We won't be, so we're going to hit enter again. Now, I'm surprised because normally when I do this and I put in that Git repository, it fills it in automatically for me. But normally when I run my terminal, I don't run it from within here. I run it from a separate window. So I open up a special Git bash window and I run it from there. And again, everybody's different in what they do and how they do it. All right. So I'm hoping, I'm hoping at least that that is still in there. There it is. Git remote add. I don't want the git remote add origin. I want, geez, it won't let me. Okay. Well, we can leave it blank and we can fill it in later. We'll just do that. So let's leave it blank. So git repository. Keywords, typically when you create, you don't care. I mean, we could type in here node.js, express, MERN stack. We could type anything we wanted, but we'll just leave it blank. The author, typically, as you'd guess, you're going to put in your name. The license, there are different ones. The two that people use most often are the one that's there, ISC, and the other one that I usually use is MIT because I know that's open source. All right. So once you put that in and you hit enter, it says, I'm about to create a file for you called package.json. These are going to be the contents of that file. Is that okay? We are going to just hit enter, but before we do, you'll notice all we have here, the only thing that's here is app.js. So you can type in a Y, you can type in yes, or the easiest way is to just hit enter. And now what you'll notice after we hit enter, all right, after we came in here and after we hit enter, is we now have a file called package.json. What's in that? All the stuff that we just entered. Everything that we just put in there. And again, this is JSON. They are key value pairs. The name is first node project. The version is 1.0.0. Key value, all the way down. All right. Now, we don't have to change it now, but we are going to go and right now, we're going to remove this line that's in here and we're going to add 2 of our own lines. So I'd like you to remove the existing line 7. I'd like you to remove that, and we're going to add 2 lines of our own. All right. And I'm going to go till 12:55, and then we're going to take a break. This first line is really, really important. It's going to be start, and then we will put in, I'll just hit enter, the space bar a couple times, and I'm going to put in here, all right, node app.js, just like that. All right, and I'm going to hit enter. Not sure why it's doing that, why I've got those spaces, I mean the gray in there, but it's okay, it's not going to hurt anything. Then we're going to put in dev start. All right, dev start. And again, we'll put in a colon. And this one will say nodemon app.js. All right. Oh, there has to be a comma at the end of this line. That's why I got the error. Okay, there we go. So I want yours to look like this, and I'm going to explain then what both those lines are. So I'll give you a second to key that in. Excuse me. Sorry, I swallowed. Okay. Take a drink here. All right. Now, a very interesting thing happened last week. All right. What I have been using for the last several years for students to use to freely host their projects in this class has been something called Heroku. Heroku at Heroku.com. Well, in their infinite wisdom, Heroku decided last week that they're they're not going to have a free version anymore. Now, so I immediately contacted them and said, wait a minute, what about people in education? And they said, no, we will still have a free version for education. And I said, fine, how will it work? And they said, you'll have to wait until sometime in September when we release it. That ain't good. But the reason I'm telling you that is in order to use products like Heroku, they need a line like this. What we're going to be doing in just a moment is we're going to be running our programs like this. Not like this, even though it'll work, we will run ours like this. And if you say why, I will tell you after the break. All right? So if you put in both those lines, and I've given you plenty of time now with all my coughing, do a file, save, and close that package.json file. Now, back in your terminal, all right, and I'm making my terminal bigger again, we're going to put in 2 commands. I'm going to explain those commands, and then we're going to take our first break. The first command I want you to put in is npm I express, the one we were going to do earlier. npm I express, and hit enter. That went out to the Node Package Manager, found the Express software, and brought it in as part of what we're working on. All right, we're going to go and add one more package that we really haven't looked much at, but I did explain to you what it was, and I'll say it again in a little bit. But we want to say npm I, but this is important. You want to say minus capital D and then type in nodemon. So the first one was npm I express. This one is npm I minus capital D as in dog, nodemon. After you put that in, hit enter. All right. Should just take, even on a slow connection, a matter of seconds. Now, what you may or may not have noticed is we've got a new folder here. It's called Node Modules. And my gosh, if you open it up, it's humongous. Because what it has in there, amongst other things, is it has Express and all of the dependencies for Express, and it also has nodemon and all of the dependencies, all the thing nodemon depends on. All right. Now, is what I just said important? It is for one reason. All right. When we end up taking our project and pushing it out to the internet, we do not want to push that out there. We do not want to push that out there. All right. And I'm going to show you, of course, as we go on, how we keep that from happening. All right. One more thing, and then we're taking our first break. I want you to open up again package.json. If you need to, make your editor window in VS Code a little bigger, because I want you to go down to the bottom, and in particular, I want to mention these. Those were not there when we started. Those were the dependencies that were added when we added Express and when we added nodemon. Remember that when we added Express, we did npm Node Package Manager I for install and Express. All right. We'll get into, not today, but at another time, what this means. This caret here means, basically it means use the newest version. All right. But that was put in there basically as a production dependency. But with nodemon, nodemon is a tool that you use while you're testing. So we don't want to use that in production mode. Right now, we are in literally test mode. You are in test mode until you push this thing out to the internet. All right, we're not doing that. We're not going to do that today. All right, but it is a development dependency. All right, so I want you to understand, every time we do an npm I and we don't put a minus D in there, it's going to go in this list. Anytime we do an npm I with a minus D, it's going to go into here. And the last thing I'll mention, because I'm already running over a little bit, is you'll notice there's a package lock JSON file. All right, and if I open that, it basically says everything that we're using and the version of everything that we're using. All right, let's take a break. It's 12:57. Let's come back at 1:07 and we'll pick it up right here. All right, if you have any questions, because I'm going to walk out for a minute, I need a new water. But if anybody has any questions, otherwise I'll see you at 1:07.
Mr. Scott.
Yes.
So I lost my computer over the last weekend, so I had to go get a new one, and so I had to reinstall NodeJS and all that while we were doing this.
Okay.
I forgot to reinstall that. Is there any way you could send me like the commands that you entered to create the JSON file, and or I can just rewatch the recording after class. That's also just equally okay. Just wondered.
Well, I can give them to you. I mean, basically, what we have run is npm init.
Uh,
Now, if you want to catch up quickly, because you can always go back and manually change it later, just put npm init space minus lowercase y and hit enter, and that'll create everything for you. That will create
init
that.
space minus y.
Yes, npm space init space minus y, and hit enter.
I think it's giving me invalid. I think probably because I already hit enter on just the default init.
Okay, then just keep hitting it. Just keep hitting the enter key. It's not going to hurt anything.
Okay.
All right. Then the only other two things that we did was we put in this command once your prompt comes back, npm I express. Can you see that on the screen right now?
Yes.
Okay, so go ahead and put in that, and that'll put in your production dependency.
Okay.
And then after that, npm I minus capital D nodemon.
Okay.
And you're all caught up.
All right. Perfect. Thank you.
All
I
right.
just
Sure.
I
No,
didn't
not
want
a
to take
problem.
your break or anything. So it sounds good.
Not a problem. All right. I'll be back in a couple minutes. All right, it is 1:07, so I am going to start back up again. And the first thing I want to do here is I've just mentioned that package lock file to you, but again, I want you to see it. This is a big file. All right, as you work your way down in here, notice it's well over 1,000 lines. But basically what it has is with all the different stuff that you're using in here that gets referenced, all right, all that different stuff, it's telling you what version it's using. And you'll notice that sometimes it will have, like notice here, there's a tilde, here there is nothing. You saw before where there was the little caret like this, and there can be other things. And basically what that is doing is it's letting the system know what version of something it should use. I'll talk more about it, but just not right now. Just wanted you to hear that though. So I mentioned to you before the break that what we're going to do, and we can do this right now. In our project here, let's add a brand new file. So click up here in your project and just click there for new file and call this, start it with a period, dot get ignore. Just like that, a period and then get ignore and hit enter. All right. And in there for right now, I just want you to type in node underscore modules. So we created a file called get ignore with a period at the beginning. And we are putting in there node modules. Once you put that in, do a file save. All right, and then close. All right, now you may or may not be able to see this, but what just happened is that node modules went gray. And what that means, for lack of better words, what that means is, hey, you know what? We're not going to add that file or in anything that's in there, or add that folder in any of its contents when we go from a development mode to a production mode, when we actually put this thing out live on the internet. All right. Now, I said that we don't want to include that file. I mean, so it's like, well, then how do we get it? Well, I'm going to ask you to do something that's going to sound a little weird, but I'm going to ask you to do it anyway. I want you to go up to this node modules that we just grabbed, this thing that we just created in here. I want you to remove this folder. So click on it, right mouse click, and choose delete. It'll ask you, are you sure you want to do that? And say, move it to the recycle bin. It'll take a second and it's gone. All right. So you're like, well, what did that do? Well, remember, we've got this file that's called package.json. And that file has in it nodemon and it has express. All right. What does that matter? If I want to go and basically bring back what I just removed, if I want to bring back node modules, all I have to do is come down to my terminal window and just say npm I. And that means go out to the package.json file, find any packages, be they production or development, that are in there, find them and install them. So after typing in npm I, hit enter, and what you're going to notice in just a minute here is what's going to be back here in just a second will be our node modules folder. And there it is. Now, you might even say, that's fine and dandy. Why are you even telling us this? Well, at least occasionally you might either you might grab, maybe you find a really neat looking application that somebody made online and you want to go and look at it, and you're going to make changes to it or use it as a template for something you want to do, etc. Well, if you go and just go in there and try to run run it, it's not going to work. You're going to have to do an npm I to do what we just did. All right. So what we did, just going back, yeah, I know it's a little bit of review, but I think it's worth it, is when we came through here, we first did the npm init, and the npm init initialized the node package manager. It's the thing that created our package.json file. Then we went into the npm init file, the package.json file, all right, and we did go in and manually changed that script that said test on it. We added a start script, which just said node app.js, and we added a dev start, and that was nodemon app.js. The start one you should always have in there. The other one we didn't have to add, and we didn't have to call it dev start. We could have called it whatever we wanted. All right, then then we went in and we manually added the Express package from the Node Package Manager. All right. And when we did that, all right, that added the Node Modules folder, and that Node Modules folder included Express and all of the dependencies of Express. Then we went in and we added as a development dependency, because this was a production dependency, we went in and added as a development dependency NodeMon, which is Node Monitor. And if you say, I don't know what that is, we're going to look at it in just a couple minutes. All right. All right. Then we removed, well, first, then we created the .gitignore file. And again, that .gitignore file had in it just node modules. That's all that's in there. Eventually, we'll add something else in there as well, but don't worry about it for right now. All right. Then we manually removed the node modules folder and brought it back with an npm I. All right. And again, you might think, well, man, you're spending a lot of time on this, because these are the core things you'll have to be able to do. All right. Okay. So right now, I'm going to close this gitignore because there's nothing we have to do with it. All right. So we're going to come in. I don't need that npm I anymore. I think it's the word clear if you want to clear the console. Yes, it is. So if you need to clear your terminal, it's just clear. So we're going to come in here and we're only going to put in, I don't know, maybe 10 lines of code or so. But after we do, we're going to have our first web server. We're writing a web server right now. And there are different ways of doing this. The reason I'm telling you this is if you went and watched somebody else building their first Node web server, they may do it quite a bit differently than me. All right. I don't know. From what I hear, I talked to Mr. Gudmested. We talked online this morning, and he spent all last week going over MySQL. They haven't done anything with Node yet. All right. And that's why a little bit later today, probably after our next break, we're just going to jump into the world of MySQL. All right. But I want you to start getting used to this, because eventually, hopefully by the end of the week, we're going to build our own API. All right. That's going to have the ability to do CRUD operations on it. So it'll be able to do get all records, get a single record. It'll be able to do a post. It'll be able to do a patch or a put for an update, and it'll be able to do a delete. All right. So with all that said, let's start adding some stuff. Well, we added Express because normally we're going to add that. All right, for something as simple as we're doing right now, we wouldn't have had to have added Express, but since I added it, I'm going to take advantage of it. So I'm going to say here, const Express equal, and you can do the same, please, require Express. All right, we're going to add a few more lines, but I'd like to add them one at a time, and then as we do, we're going to go over what each one of them is. All right, so the first thing there says const express equals require express. Okay, when we want to go in and use the stuff that we brought in from the Node Package Manager, all right, if we want to use that, or even if we want to use the stuff that, if you remember from last week when we went out and looked at the documentation for Node, We saw there was an FS in there for file system. We looked at path a little bit. We looked at OS for operating system and HTTP for hypertext transfer protocol. Anytime you want to be able to use the methods from those, you've got to add them, and you add them like this. You make it a constant, and it's not required, but typically whatever you're adding, you give it the same name. There's going to be a few exceptions, but we'll see those when we get to that point. So what we're saying here is we want to bring in everything that's available to us in that Express package. All right. Now, we can do that, but then we have to add another line that goes along with that. And we say const app equal Express. Now, I'm not sure why you don't need the word new there, but basically what we're doing right there is we're telling it to instantiate like an instance of Express, for lack of better words. That's not an exactly what's happening, but pretty much that is what's happening. All right. As we get into this more and as we start writing more complex applications, there'll be a lot of other stuff that we're going to be putting in here as well, just so you know. All right. Now, then we're going to come in here and we're going to next. Now we can refer to our anything we want to do with Express by using app.that. So I'm going to type in app dot, and you'll notice all the different stuff that's in here. Why am I telling you that? Well, because in particular, you'll notice there's a get, and there is a post, and there is a patch, and there is a delete. All right. So we're going to just come in here. We're just going to do an app.get right now. All right. And we're going to tell the system what we want to have happen. We're going to tell it what we want to have happen when we just bring up our application. All right. So when we bring up our application, we're going to want whatever is here to fire. All right. And as of right now, we're not going to ask it to do anything. Okay, but we have to come in here and we have to put in this, and I'll explain all of it when we go over it in a second. So please put that in and just leave it blank. In English, what we're saying is when a GET request is made to slash, which is just basically the same thing as saying when we bring it up, our home, what do we want? So this is the HTTP request. This is the HTTP response. So this is what we will be asking for. This is what we're getting back. All right. Another way to write this, I'm going to show you this right now. Don't change yours because I'm not going to do it anymore like this. You can also write it like this. That does the same thing as the arrow function that I just used. All right. But what's considered to be more in vogue today is to do it like this. All right. Now, do you have to do it like that? No. You can still do it the other way. You'll still see a lot of application code that does it the old way. And I've watched tons of videos on this, and there are a lot of people who will still do it the old way. But the recommendation is to do it the new way. So what that is saying is this is going to be a callback function. This is the function that'll be called when we go out here. Right now, we're not doing anything. All right. But if we run the program right now, it won't work because what has to happen in here is the system needs to know what computer port you want to run this program in. All right. It doesn't know. Okay. And I'm going to show you a couple things here. Okay. We could just do this. when you pick out a port, you typically pick out a number between 1,000 and 9,999. So I'm just going to pick in here. I'm going to type in this, but I'm going to change it in just a minute. But I'm going to type in here const port equal. And if I gave it a number like 4567, that would work. All right. That would say that every single time we run this, use port 4567, and it would work. All right. The problem is once we go and we move this thing out to the internet, once we go out and move this thing out to the internet, we've got no guarantee that if we're running it under Heroku or DigitalOcean or something else, we have no guarantee what port they're going to use. All right. So typically the way you write that is like this. You say port equals process, .env.port or that. So go ahead and type in this line, the new line 4, and when you get done, I want to go over that in some depth and breadth of coverage. What this is saying in English is, hey, if we're using some software that defines its own port, use that port. And if we're not, use this port. That's exactly what it says. All right. Now, right here, I had you put in nothing, and I'm going to keep that like that. Why? Because when we run this the first time, we're not going to get an error, but you're going to get a message back that you're going to think is an error, even though it's not an error. All right. So with where we are right now in here, I'm going to come down to the bottom, and I'm going to type in this app.listen, and I'm going to put in here port. And when I get done, I'm just about finished. When I get done, you can type that in. So please type in these 3 lines that are at the bottom. All right, in fact, I'm going to remove all these blank lines I got in here just because I want you to be able to see the entire script that we're putting in there. So you can now see everything. And the kind of cool news is, even though it's not going to do a darn thing right now, you've just written your first server. All right. So I've already gone through lines 1, 2, and 3. Line 4 we're going to get to in just a minute, but I don't want to talk about it now. But I want to talk about this. This tells us this is how the app is going to respond to a GET message. Okay, this tells it what to do when it starts running. Now, I want to mention something. You may know this already, you may not, you may have figured it out. I don't know. But we have all done things. I'm not going to do it right now. But if I go to the internet and I bring up a page and I right mouse click on that web page and I go to inspect, I can go to the console for it. You all know that. We've done that before. If you remember last week when we went through those array exercises, I did almost everything on the console. That is the client side console. This is the server side console. What's the difference? The difference is the stuff we send to this console is going to run down here in our terminal. So ideally, when we run this in a moment, it's going to come back and say app running on port, and we use template literals here with the backticks. And this is the variable we're using, the port variable, which we set up here to 4567. So if this works in just a moment, if this works, Down here, you're going to see a bunch of stuff, but at the bottom, it should say app running on port 4567. So my hope is every one of you has had a chance to type in these 8 or 10 lines, however many, there's a few blank lines in there, but you've had a chance to type all that in. Then we're going to do a file save. All right, I'm going to lift this up a little higher just so you can see it. And then come in down here. And remember, we could right now just type in this node app. If you don't type that in, if you just type in node app, it defaults to node app.js. We could type that in. Or we could type in npm run start. And that would go back to our package.json file and find that start command that we put in there, which was node app.js. But we also made another one that was called dev start. That's what I want you to put in. So go down into your terminal window, please, and put in npm run dev start. And unless I screwed up, which as you know with me is always possible, once you hit enter, we should get a message up that says app running on port 4567. So with npm run dev start in there, I'm going to hit enter. And it crashed. Okay, and we're going to figure out right away why it crashed. It always tells you why. It says port is not defined. All right. Okay. And it says here, app listen port. I made a constant port. Sometimes it's a little funky, so I'm going to leave that in there. Oh, there it is. That's got to be a capital port. P-O-R-T, because that's what I called it. That was my error. Hey, that wasn't the first one I've ever made. You know that. And it won't be the last one I ever make. So change that to capital port. Now, in the olden days, like 10 years ago, in JavaScript, anytime you made a constant, you made them in uppercase. Today, not so much. So if you want this to be a lowercase word port, and this to be a lowercase word port, and this to be a lowercase word port, you can do that. All right, either way, it should be fine. Okay, all right. Now, we've made a change, okay? And let's see. If you look down on the bottom, see how mine now says app running on port? Let me move this up. Mine now says app running on port 4567. The server is up and running on that port. Okay. And since we ran this using NodeMon, as soon as we made that change and saved it, it restarted the server for us. That's a server running down here on this port. All right. Now I'm going to have to do a change my share for a minute so you can see this thing actually running. All right. So I'm going to change and I'm going to bring up a browser window and I'd like you to do the same, please. So bring up a browser window. Here we are. And in your browser window, all right, come in here and type in the word localhost colon 4567. The word localhost, one word, colon 4567, and hit enter. And if it comes back and it says, should be coming back, but it's not even coming back. It should, oh, it's not going to do anything because we didn't tell it to do anything. But that's how we're going to start it. All right. So if that worked, and especially, all right, going back here, where am I? Going back into Visual Studio Code. All right. Now let's go back into here where we didn't write anything. We didn't write anything at all in here. but we're going to right now. So where you've got these two curly braces right there, hit enter. And you may or may not have noticed it restarted my server because I made a change to my app.js file. All right, it automatically restarted. Now, if I do want to stop this, I can come down here and do a Control-C and it will stop it. All right, if for some reason you have to stop it. But I'm going to come back up here and I'm going to say this. And there are plenty of different ways you can do what I'm about to show you. But I'm going to type in res.send. And I'm going to put in here, welcome to my website. All right. So I just put in, I put in that line 5, res.send, welcome to my website. In fact, it may complain, instead of res.send, let's just put a res.end in there. It may want that more than the res.send. All right. After we put that in, I'm again going to do a file, save, and it restarted the server. Now I'm going to go back. I'm going to have to change my share, of course, but I'm going to go back onto my browser. And now with that localhost :4567, notice it says, welcome to my website. All right. So what we have done here is we have created our own server. Now, the only thing that it responds to right now is the home page. So I can either put in localhost :4567 or localhost :4567 with a /. But if I come through here and let's say that I wanted to go to the about page, there isn't one. But if I came in and typed in /about and hit enter, I get an error message. Hopefully what's going to start coming together for you in the next few days is when we use get and when we use post, oh, that's what's happening. Because what we're telling it there is to go out and get the page, all right, that typically would be called like about.html. But we don't have an about.html. All right. So how can we handle that? Let's just pretend for a moment that we wanted to be able to go to /about and have it bring up an about page. And we wanted to be able to go to /contact and have it go to a contact page. Well, right now, we don't have that capability, but we can get that capability. So I'm again going to change my share. And I'm going to go back into Visual Studio Code. And I'm going to add what are referred to as routes. This is a route. This is my homepage route here. All right, I'm going to change this from welcome to my website to, you can leave it called, put whatever you want in there. But I'm going to say welcome to my homepage. All right, and I'm going to add 2 more routes. They're going to be very similar to this one, so I'm just going to copy and paste. But this one will say about, and it'll say welcome to my about page. And then I will add another one below that. And it'll be for contact. And it'll say welcome to my contact page. All right. Couple things of note here. First thing is, you may or may not have noticed this already, I do not have a single semicolon in here. It is legit to add those, but in most server-side code that I have seen, they don't put semicolons in, hardly ever, if ever. That's the first thing. The second thing of note here, you may or may not have noticed, is the word res is blackened and the word REQ, all right, the word REQ is not. What does that mean? That means we're not using the request part of HTTP. All right. Let's see if we can add that. Now I'm doing this off the top of my head, so let's see, what would it be? I think this will work. We're going to find out. We're going to put in here console.log req.url like that. And you'll notice now they're both blackened. All right, I'm going to actually add this line here. And I'm going to add it here. And I'm going to add it up here. All right, so taking this whole thing from the top then, we came in and we brought Express in from the Node Package Manager. Then we associated it with our app. This doesn't have to be called app. It literally can be called anything. But historically, the standard is to use the word app there. All right. Then we set up our port designation. We did not have to use the process.env.port or 4567. We could have just set it to 4567. But if we'd have done that, then we would have to make sure we change that line before we would put that out to production. Then we set up 3 routes. So I'll just put a comment here so you can see it. So this will be our homepage route. This next one will be, and I'll go right back to them in just a second. This will be our about page route. I guess I can't spell either, can I? And finally, this one will be our contact page route. All right, so taking them in turn. Hopefully everybody gets this. Hopefully that makes sense to you, what's going on here. So let's jump down and look at this one. We'll look at each one of the 3 that are in here. So this says in English, whenever I either do a slash or just am on my home page, I want you to show online. I want you to show that. Welcome to my homepage. All right. But what should now show down here, where it says console, that line, that should show it my console down here. It should show me the URL. And I'm doing the same thing for both the about page and for the contact page. So I'm going to save it and run it and see if it works. So file, save. I'm going to come back up here. All right. The good news is, if I had done something wrong, this would have crashed. You'd be seeing a bunch of errors, and then you'd see a message down at the bottom literally saying your app has crashed. What a lot of developers will do, and I tend to do this pretty often myself, is if you're going to make big changes up in your app.js file, you will typically stop your application from running, wait till you're done, and start it up again. Now, that said, some people say, no, I don't do that. I keep it up because if it breaks, I'll know right away where it broke. All right. But again, every time you make a change in here, you're telling this to restart. So some people like that, some people don't. But it is still running on port 4567. So if I come back in here and I change my share and I go back to the internet here. Now, before, when we put this in, localhost 4567/contact, it gave us an error, cannot get contact. But if I refresh the screen, welcome to my contact page. So that worked. And if I come in here and I put in about, welcome to my about page. Now, if I put in something that doesn't exist, I still get an error. So if I come in there and say hello, right, oops, I screwed that up. Let me try that again. Localhost, I forgot my slash, :4567/hello, cannot get to hello because it's attempting to go out and load hello.html in here. It can't find it. It doesn't know what to do. So it just gives that error message. Now, a couple things I want to mention to you about this. All right. Believe it or not, some of the stuff I've shown you already is fairly complex. Now, some people would hear me say that it's fairly complex and they would be laughing. They're like, yeah, right. But it is, because what I've already shown you is how we can use the OR, and we can come in here and use this. All right. What you're going to find is eventually, not today, but we're going to add another file in here. It's going to be like .getignore, but it's going to be called .env, and that will hold all of our environment variables. All of our environment variables. And we'll probably even end up moving this into that file. So what would you want to put into an environment variable file? Well, as an example, either by the end of this week or early next week, if not earlier, we're going to be starting to work with databases. And if you've got a username and a password, I don't want to put those out here where if somebody got a hold of my code, they could see them. All right. I want to put them in an env file. Why? Because that env file is going to be it's going to hold stuff that you don't want to share. We'll just leave it at that for right now. All right. So we came in here, we brought Express in. We brought Express in from the Node Package Manager. We created our instance. We set up our port, and then we set up 3 different routes. All right. We set up a route to handle being on the home page. We set a route that's going to handle, all right, both being on the home page, and another one that's going to handle being on an about page, and another one that's going to handle being on a contact page. All right. Now, absolutely nothing wrong with what we've done, except hopefully you'll agree with me. That's not what I want to have come up when I go to a home page. I don't want that. I want my home page to come up. Well, we don't have one. All right. So we're going to make one right now. We're going to make a home page and an about page and a contact page. All right. And we won't put much into them, but we'll put a little bit in there just so you can see it. All right. But when we do this, we're going to put this into a special folder. And again, what I'm saying right now may not make a boatload of sense, but it should start making more sense as we go on and on in here. All right. But I want you to come up to where you've got your first node project right here. And I want you to add a new folder right there. So click folder. And I want that folder to be called public. All right. And in that public folder, this is the kind of work that we used to do in the AWD1111 class. What do you mean, Jeff? Well, in this public folder, I'm going to click on that. In the public folder, I'm going to add another folder called CSS. All right. And so I want that in there. I hate adding stuff inside here of code because I seem to always do it wrong. So let me jump back. You won't see this for just a second, but you'll see it in just a moment. All right. I'm going to come back in here to my node projects. And where is it? We called it first node project, I believe. What's that? Come on, Jeff. Where are you? There it is. First node project. All right. And in public, I do have a CSS folder. That's good. So that did work. But under public, I'm also going to make a JS folder. And in my CSS folder, I'm going to put in a file. You'll see it all in just a moment. That I'm going to call styles.css. And In my JS folder, I'm going to put in a file that's going to be called scripts.js. Oops, try that again. And then finally, I'm going to add one more folder in here that's called images. And eventually, I would like to add an image in there. All right, let me get back. So I'm at my share so you can see what the heck I just did. Hopefully you can now see on your screen. All right, please tell me if you can't, but hopefully you can now see on your screen what we've been working on. So I created a public folder, and underneath that public folder, I have a CSS folder with styles.css in it. I have an images folder, which is currently empty. And I've got a JS folder with script.js in it. All right. What I want you to understand is everything I just put into that public folder is client side. It's not server side, so it has nothing to do with what we're doing in here when we're running our terminal. All right, except that what we want to do in just a minute is tell it to bring up that file in here instead of doing this. All right, we're going to do that after the break, okay, because I want to double check the one I've written already, because I just don't want to give you the wrong code, that's all. All right, but again, public is typically where you put what's referred to as static files. All right, your CSS, your images, etc., the stuff that typically isn't going to change much, if ever. And the other thing to realize is anything that we put in this JS folder in scripts.js, anything we put in there, that is client-side JavaScript. What we've been writing all period is server-side JavaScript. All right. Now, in order for us to be able to use this, we don't want to type this res.end. Okay. Instead, we want it to load files. Now, you may or you may not remember this. All right, sorry, I got to change my share again. But one of the things that we looked at last week when we went out here, where are we? All right, when we went out, not to the Node Package Manager, but when we went out to npmjs.org, and we went in here and we, nope, not npm, I'm sorry, NodeJS, NodeJS.org. Sorry about that. When we looked through this documentation, one of the things that was in here was the file system. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to tell the system that we want to go in and we want to load a file. So when you look in here, there's a bunch of different things that you can do with files. All right. And like I said, I've written this and I thought I saved it onto the desktop. I didn't, so I'm going to have to look for it. And I'll do that during your break. But we are going to want to call something from the file system. All right. And we're going to want to also let the system know that we're using this special folder called public. We're going to tell it that we want it to use this special folder called public. And I have, if you said, do you have to call it public? I'm not positive if you do, but I've never seen it called anything else but public. All right, so I'm just telling you that. Not only that, when we come in here and we start looking at the stuff you can do with the file system, what you're going to notice sooner or later is when you start to look at some of the stuff that's in here, is that some of the stuff that's in here is going to call things synchronously, and some of the stuff that's in here is going to call it asynchronously. So who cares? You should. If you call something synchronously, what you're saying is wait until it's completed and then go on. If you call something asynchronously, you're saying call it. And if it doesn't come back immediately, kind of put it in the background, go on and do whatever you have to do next. And when you get some more time, or when you finish everything else, then grab it for me. And that's the whole idea behind synchronous and asynchronous. We're going to talk about that after the break. All right. And what I want to mention to you in here then, sorry, changing this again, is we're going to come up to the top here and we're going to add something. So you can add up here const fs, that's file system, equal require fs. Now we're able to go in and we are able to grab any of those things that are in the file system. We are able to grab them and we are able to start using them. All right. You'll notice that right now the word fs is grayed out where it says const fs. And it's grayed out because even though we've declared it, we're not using it anywhere. We will do that after the break in just a couple minutes. So I think I'm going to change this around a little bit. What I'm going to do is after the break, we're going to see if we can, I'm going to put some, in here. We'll go after the break and we will add a couple pages in here, some HTML pages. All right. And we will see if we can use the file system to read those in. So we will replace this line with an actual call to the file system that says, hey, go out there, please, and grab my file and bring it in here. All right. Then if we've done that, again, it may not sound like we did a lot, but we've done a heck of a lot, because then what we've done is we've written our own web server that's hosting our own website. Now, that's the good news. What's the bad news? The bad news is we're the only ones who can see it, because it's still, we are using our local machine as both a client and as a server. All right. But give it time. All right. We will fix that. All right. Now, in order to be able to let the system do this, we're going to have to, and I'm going to show you right now. So I guess I got to change my share again. Boy, I hate this. All right. And see because I can give you my own definition, but it probably won't be very good. All right. We are going to use what's called app.use. So somebody was smarter than me, wrote out into stackoverflow.com, hey, what is app.use? All right. So somebody else came in here and said, well, you use app.use when you want to write middleware. And what's middleware? It's something that literally exists in the middle. So it is existing between the code that is out there for Express and the code we put in. It's in the middle. All right. But we want to use app.use, and there's different ways that you can use app.use, but you say app.use, then you tell it what you want to use it for. So I want to use app.use, and I want to use public. Hopefully it'll find it, because I want to give you the right syntax. Serving static files in Express, that's what we want to do. And you may or may not have noticed, it's from the expressjs.com website. All right, so somewhere in here, there it is. So I'm going to grab that line of code, and then I'm going to go and do another share change and go back into Visual Studio Code and put that line of code right there. You want to put it there before you actually want to use it. So we're telling it this is middleware. I'll put a comment here that says middleware. You can write your own middleware, and you can use middleware that's been written for you. So remember, app is our instance of Express. So Express has a method called use. And this is saying is, hey, any static files are going to exist in a folder called public. So now when we access static files like HTML files, like CSS files, like client-side JavaScript files, or like image files, this is telling the system, oh, that stuff lives out in public. All right. So very quickly, because we're going to take a break in 3 minutes, but I'm going to come back here and in my public folder, so right there, I'm going to go and add 3 files. I'm going to first add index.html. All right. Then in public, I'm going to come in and I'm going to add about.html. And finally, I'm going to come back in here, not in there, and oh boy, and under public, all right, I'm going to come in and I'm going to add contact.html. All right. You've got to be real leery when you're doing this. Okay. And you want to make sure, okay, I'm in public. Okay. So what's in public? CSS is in public. Okay. Images is in public. JS is in public. So all that stuff is in public. And there's nothing in images. So that's fine. But I want to make sure that my about.html, my contact.html, and my index.html, you want to make sure they're in public or this ain't going to work. And I'm going to keep it simple. So I'm just going to come in here and put in my exclamation point, hit tab, change the name of this to home. Oops. And I'm just going to put in an H1 tag. It says this is the home page. Now, that's not much more than what we just looked at, but previously we were just putting in a line of code. Now we're putting in a whole web page. All right, so I'm going to do a file save here, and now I'm going to bring up contact, paste that in, and change this to contact, and change this to contact, and save. Finally, I'm going to bring up the about. Again, paste that in, change that to about, and change that to about. All right. It is 2 o'clock, so let's take a break. We'll come back then, please, at 10 after 2. And I want to find, like I said, I'm just going to go online and look for the right syntax for this. All right. Anybody have any questions before I send you on your break?
Yeah, could you possibly run through what the script was for the dev start and the start?
Sure.
And thank you.
That will be under your package.json file. And it's the 2 lines that I added were right here. I removed the test line that was there and replaced them with these 2 lines. Got it? Questions? You got it?
Yeah, just about. Just
Okay.
got it. Yep.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, no problem. Hmm. All right. I don't know if you're back yet or not. I'm hoping that you are. So I want to show you quickly what I have done. So let me make sure that I've got the right share showing here. All right, I'm in Visual Studio Code. I want to show you quickly what I did for these index files, the etc. All right, so I just literally came in here and hit the exclamation point that filled all of this in. I created a style sheet, and there's a reason I did that. I want to show you it. All right, it's very simple. It just changes the background color to blanched almond. And there's an H1 in here. All right, that for the contact page, it says this is the contact page. And then I put in some client side JavaScript. That's what's in the contact page. In the about page, I again just did the exclamation point. You already saw that. Added the style sheet. But in here, I added an image with the Node logo that I put into the images folder. I didn't have to do that. I could have given it the image address from the internet too, but I did it like that. All right. And then on my home page, the only thing I did was to add that link right there. But to show you this and to show you that it works, etc. All right, I'm going to change my share so I'm back on the internet. There's my contact page, but before I go there, I'm going to start by going to the home page. You'll notice if I just go to slash, this is the home page. Still works just fine, not a problem. But unlike before, now if I put in slash about, looks like it didn't work. And the reason it looks like it didn't work is before when I did that, I was literally looking for the word about, but now I'm trying to load a file. I'm trying to load the file that's called about.html. So I have to put in here not just about, but about.html. All right, and once I put in about.html and I hit enter, there's my logo. And if I change and put in here contact.html, notice the first thing that happens is my client-side JavaScript runs. I just put an alert in there so you could see it. And then I get this. So what have we done? And I'm going to go back and show you the code that I put into app.js in a moment. But what have we done here? We now have literally written our own website. You know, this would be a lot better. All right. What I'm hoping you're going to be able to do in a week or so is to take the website that you've created, that gym one that's due next Sunday, and set it up inside of Node, all right, and be able to run it from there. Because then when we push it out to the internet, you will have a complete website. So the more professional that looks, the better off you're going to be. And hopefully you're going to want to do that. And again, hopefully that'll become part of your portfolio at the end of the semester. All right, so let's go back in. I got to change my share, but let's go back in and take a look at what changes we had to make in app.js to get that to work. Now I've already shown you index.html, so I don't think we need to see that anymore. I've already shown you about.html, so I don't think we need to look at that anymore. And I've shown you contact. I don't think we need to look at that anymore. This is all I put into the styles.css file. And I just put that in there just so you could see it. But once I put that in, then I had to put in that link statement into all the files, into all the static HTML files I wanted to use it. If I'd only put it in the home page, then the background of the home page would have been blanched almond, but the background for the other two pages would have been white. All right. Same as it was back in the days when we were doing this just on the client side. All right. So let's look at this. All right. So I want to take it from the top. Nothing new here, but I did add this. All right. And I'm not even sure with FS if I needed it because I used send file. I just went and looked for it because I couldn't find mine. All right. I thought I had it here in a hard copy, but I can't find it in my mess that's in front of me. So I'm not sure if I need this line of code or not. So I can probably see if I comment that out. I want to just see if the program blows up or not. It did blow up. Nope. It says that it's running. So let's see if it is. So I'm going to do a file save. And I just want to see if it still works the same. I'll come right back to this, I promise. So let's see. Yeah, that still worked. And that still worked. I'm just bringing up the same HTML pages I had before. And that still works. So evidently I don't need that line. As I mentioned to you before, there are multiple ways that you can do this. I just grabbed the send file. Now, as we go look at this, I changed this. I changed line 7 to line 8. Did I have to? I don't think so, but I did it because I wanted to show you this is the kind of thing you're going to be doing. Underscore underscore dir name means the directory in which this file is in. Our app.js file is inside of the directory or folder first node project. So we're telling it that we want it to use that. Now it probably would have worked without that because this is what's different between this one and this one. In line 8, I added that. All right. But, and then the slash public, and here it's just public. But this says from my home directory, go to public. I like it when there's no doubt. All right. To me, even though line 8 is more typing than line 7 is, we're leaving no doubt that the public folder is a folder underneath a directory I am currently in. Or in other words, under the directory where this file is. All right. Then for each one of these, now notice how this changed. I took the line that says res.end and I commented it out. And I replaced it with this. I did that all 3 times. What's different? For the homepage, it's index.html. For /about, it's about.html. For /contact, it's contact.html. But all 3 of these work the same. I am telling it that when you click that, I want you to send that file there. So display that file. And it's a file that's under dir name index.html. And you go, wait a minute. Index dir name, that's under there. Well, what we did here was we said dir name is public. Again, we may be able to just remove this. I don't know. I'm not going to try it right now. When stuff works, I'm tired of saying to you, yeah, we can do this, and then removing it and having it break. So try that yourselves if you want to. All right. Now, when we tell it to send the file, it can possibly give us an error. So in other words, if I had put in there in docs instead of index, I don't have a file in docs. So what should it do? Well, if it finds an error, I'm just telling it to log it and return. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to save this. And I'm going to come back to here. I'm on my home page. You go, well, it's still showing. Index. All right. Well, let's take a look down here. And of course, I've just about lost my console here. So let's view, or my terminal, view terminal. There we go. All right. And it looks like it's still running. I'm not sure if it's got a cached version or whatever. The point though is this. All right, when I come in here and I give it something that doesn't exist, I give it a wrong path or something else, it's a possibility that it will be an error. If there's an error, what do you want to do? All right, I'm telling it to just log that error and return because there's no sense in going on. I could have actually taken this and just done this. A lot of times you'll see it done like that because it's less code. All right. So if that is handling the error condition, so I gave it a wrong path, the file doesn't exist, I don't have permission to see the file, or whatever that is that it happens to be. All right. And I'm doing that there. I'm doing the exact same thing here, except again, it's about, and I'm doing the exact same thing here. All right. And again, the only difference is that it's contact or it's about or it's index. Now, I will be sure when I get done, I'm going to take this repo, I'm going to push this thing out there. So if you're following along and you've gotten behind or anything else, you'll have the working version. All right. Are there any questions on what I've gone over thus far? All right. Then what I want to show you, I asked you to go and basically upload a GitHub repo that it's got today's date on it. So it's called Monday, 8/29. All right. And let me change here. All right. What's in there is the following. The first thing that's in there is a JavaScript guessing game. And I decided not to even go over this. I just gave it to you. All right. It's something that I used to assign, and I gave it to you. Why? Because it has some DOM manipulation in it. And if you don't remember DOM manipulation, that'll hopefully get you back on the road to remembering it. So that's the first thing. Second thing, there's a folder in here that's called Traversy MySQL. All right. 8 years ago, Mr. Brad Traversy came up and made a fairly simplistic course on using MySQL. All right. Nothing about Node in it. It's all MySQL. I did screenshots of some of the work that he did, and I'm going to show them when we move over and we start talking MySQL. So that's there. Then there's something that's called Unit 1 Review. We're going to look at that in a minute. There's 5 PowerPoint presentations. And yeah, I hate reading PowerPoint to you, so I won't read. All right, but I want to show them to you because these are things I wrote a couple of years ago, or a year or so ago for the class, and I found them and I thought, you know what, these wouldn't be bad to show. And there are some examples in here as well. And then finally, in here, there is what's going to be your first real homework. We're not going to talk about that today. We'll talk about it tomorrow. And there's a thing that says MySQL sample database. And then there is the actual database. All right. We'll talk about all this stuff. But for now, I want to double click on where it says Unit 1 Review. And I want to bring up the first of these PowerPoint presentations. And believe me, I'm not going to spend much time on them. And I know with a lot of you like, wait a minute, you always tell us you don't go over PowerPoints with us. Yeah, but I think, I can be wrong, always am, but I think these hopefully will help to crystallize what we've been talking about. All right. So, and that's the wrong one. Right. That's the right one right there. All right. So I brought up the wrong one. So let me change my share. That's the one I want. Please tell me if you cannot see right now a PowerPoint presentation that says Unit 1 Intro to Node.js Part 1. If you don't see that, say something. All right, I want to go over this, but it's 2:27. I want to go over all of this stuff by 3 o'clock. So give me a half an hour, all right, to go through all of this. Some of the stuff that's in here, as we go through it, you may or may not end up saying, we already covered that. Yeah. But now you've got it in another format. All right, so let me start from the current slide. There we go. All right. I don't have to go through an installation instructions for Node. You've already done that. The build and run a simple Node app, we've kind of done that today. Build and run a simple Node web server, we did that today. Understand basic JavaScript asynchronous methods. I want to spend a little time on that. You'll notice what I tried to do in here is whenever I went over something, and I wrote these, so if you think they suck, I wrote them. All right. I gave the source for everything that I used. Okay. So we all know how to install Node already, so I can just skip right through that. You know the Node -v and the npm -v. All right. This we did in class, but it's very similar to what I did with you. All right. So we created a couple new files, and all we put in there was a console.log, my first node.js program. You ran it, and it came up and it said in the console, my first Node.js program. Nothing cool there. All right. Then we went in and we wrote a server. Now, what you're going to find in here, these aren't the exact same lines of code that we just did. So let's talk about them. Instead of adding the Express package, we're adding the HTTP package. So why, Jeff, why did you add Express? Because I wanted to show you how you put a production level dependency into your package.js file. That's why. But we could have done it like this. So
Mr. Scott, it looks like there's nothing on your view currently.
Okay. Is it there now?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Well, if you didn't see those other ones, like I said, that's the install. You already know how to do an install. All right, that was just, I had people write just a console.log in there, my first Node.js program, and that brought us to here. And like I said, this is another way of writing what we wrote. You'll notice there are some similarities. There are some differences. So let's first talk about the differences. Instead of coming in here and instead of using Express, I used HTTP. All right. So we're requiring HTTP instead of requiring Express and saying const app, etc. All right. The port is being set up the same way. Now, I just want to tell you this right now. Hopefully you can see on your screen right now what I just highlighted. Port 3000, as we get going, don't use port 3000. Why? Because once we get into the R part of the MERN stack, React tries to run on port 3000. So let's hold off on using 3000 until we get to some React stuff. All right. Then this is different than what we did. We didn't do a create server. We did an app.listen, and I used the arrow functions. I didn't use the old type of function. But the same thing is happening here. We are creating a server. You have to pass it in the request and the response. This write head is going to write out to the system a 200 level message, meaning it worked. And it says, hey, we're using plain text in here. Now, another one you can put in is text/JSON or text/HTML, but it's plain text. So this is the res.end. It says hello world. Then we tell it to listen on that port. and we tell it the app is up and running on that port. So we do that, and what's going to happen when we run it is going to look very similar to what we did before. Once we go out to localhost 3000, it's going to say hello world. And when we look in our console, it's going to say app is up and running on port 3000. This is a little older. I decided today to show it to you more in more new school as opposed to old school. That's why I did it the way I did it. All right. Then we ran it. There's what you saw again in our console on the server. And when you ran it, it just came up and said hello world right there, no biggie. And then I explain what's going on in each line. This is what I just explained to you. I don't want to read this to you. All right, you can all read. So read it yourselves. All right, but it explains what's going on in every line that's in here. All right. Now, the rest of this particular unit starts talking about asynchronous JavaScript. Okay, the class that you're in right now, the class you are in this class synchronously. In other words, I am talking, you are listening. Mr. McLean has a question, he asks it. All right, it's immediate. And technically, I'm supposed to, at least, if he goes, Mr. Scott, can you stop for a second? I'm supposed to stop. He asks this question. He says, can you go back over those commands? I do that. That's synchronous. All right, but the people who are taking this class who are at work right now and are watching it on tape or whatever are taking it asynchronously. So when something is asynchronous, typically there's going to be a time lapse someplace. All right, so as it says, normally program code runs straight along. You go through lines, you got 10 lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, boom, you're done. Now, if a function relies on the result of another function, it has to wait. Now, what's the problem though? The problem is if you're making a call to a database and it takes a while. You don't typically want synchronous programming where you essentially stop. You want asynchronous programming. So as it says there, this is not a good use of computer processing power because you're making it wait because it can't do anything. All right. So it says it's up to the programming environment you are using to provide APIs to allow tasks to run asynchronously. And as they mentioned there, JavaScript has 3 ways. We have looked at some of this before. Callbacks are the old way, and they lead to literally what's called callback hell. And if you think, what the heck is callback hell? I'm not going to do it now, but open up a window in your browser and type in callbackhell.com. It's a one-page website that'll show you how callbacks can lead to callback hell. All right. From callbacks, we went to promises. And a promise is in one of 3 states. If you try doing something and it worked with a promise, the promise is known as being resolved. If you try doing something with a promise and it doesn't work, the promise is what's known as rejected. And when the code hasn't run yet, so you're sort of in purgatory, you're not resolve, you're not reject, then the promise is in what's called pending mode. All right. In the last few years, there have been advancement made to promises where we use async await. So the bottom line is you should use async await when you can, promises when you must, and callbacks as a last resort. That said, there's still thousands, if not millions of lines of code out there that use callbacks and promises, and they're probably not going to change tomorrow. So again, if you want more, I'm just going to leave it at that. So there's stuff on callbacks. You end up with a lot of these where you got this within this, within this, within this, and it gets to be really ugly. All right. So, as it says, promises were designed to be something that takes less time. Anytime you can save some CPU cycles and make things run faster, that's considered a win. All right. So a promise, as it says, is a special JavaScript object that links the producing code and the consuming code together. You get something that looks like this. All right. In fact, let's see. Not the greatest of examples, but you can see I'm going to go all the way up to the 30. But here we've got return new promise. All right, this says if error, so this is resolving the promise. It worked. Otherwise, we reject the promise because it didn't work. These are not the greatest examples, but they are examples. All right. All right. And then as it says, the promise, the implementation, the way it works underneath the hood is the same. What has changed is it's a little cleaner to look at. So now they've come up with async await. All right. And I guess I didn't even show the example, but we will be looking at this. You will be using promises. You will be using async await in here. I don't know. I guess we are doing some regular just callbacks too. All right. Well, that was the first one. And yes, I'm sure I'm going to have to change my share again. So all right, so this is part 2. This we can run through fast. You know what NPM is. It's the Node Package Manager. You know how to run NPM. All right. So there'll probably be a couple major commands and packages in here we have not yet talked about. All right. But this is more historical in nature. So I'm not going to go through that. Here is some stuff on the package.json file. So if either A, you didn't get enough, or B, it didn't make sense to you, you can look through this. All right. Now, this is from a couple years ago, but to my knowledge, it's pretty much the same file. This is the output of that. Now, I mentioned you may have heard me say this, you may not have, but we have been running npm init when we start a packet, when we start a new project. If instead of typing in npm init, we type in npm init -y, it basically takes all the defaults for those. You can come into this file and like, for instance, let's just say that I spelled my name wrong, or I wanted to put Jeffrey Scott in there instead of Jeff Scott. You can come into this file, into the package.json file, and change what's in there. We did that. We changed the scripts. So you can do that if you want to or need to do that. All right, we went over the npm install. So you've seen that. Don't worry about this minus question.
There's nothing streaming on your view again.
I don't know why. All right. I appreciate hearing it though. Now is it showing npm install with -g flag?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Most of the other stuff we just went over in here, it's all review. Now, I don't ever use the -g flag. What happens when you use the -g flag with npm is it permanently saves the package into a special folder on your system. I don't remember where it is, but you can look it up if you want. I don't see a reason to install anything with the -g flag. I never use it. All right, the -d flag, the development flag, I already told you about. I think you can say -dev as well. I don't know why you'd want to because it's more typing, but I think that'll work too. And just like you can install packages, you can uninstall them. npm uninstall, and it'll take the package and its dependencies out of your node modules folder, okay? So especially if you added the wrong package, you can just uninstall it. All right, the npm run, I've already shown you that. Don't worry about this install versus command line interface, no biggie there. NodeMon, again, if you want more, you don't need that -G, but do put in the -D for NodeMon. And if you want more on it, I've got the link to it. All right, we have not talked at all about debug, but as it says in here, debug is a JavaScript utility modeled after Node.js Core's debugging technique. Okay, so you can run it. So if you're working on a program and you just can't understand why something isn't working, you can try running the debug command on it. The .env, this is something we're going to add later. That this is how you add that env file that I told you about before. It's literally called period env, but there actually is a package for it, dot, which means the period env, if you want to look that up. Express we already have talked about. Here's a couple other ones, favicon and helmet. There's a lot of happy joy, ESLint. All right, so I'm just going to stop it right there because I told you I was going to be done with this and then we were going to take our break. So let me bring up the next one. I will again change my share, and if Mr. McLean or somebody else will be nice enough to tell me if after I change it you can't see it, because then I'll make sure that I change the share again. All right, so here was the third part. And this is a little bit more complex, using Express.js in a Node application. Some of this stuff, when I looked at it, I thought of doing this first, but I don't know if you agree with me on this or not, but I think most people who are in this class learn better by doing than they do by watching. And that's why I decided to actually give you a working example and had us do that and then go back over this. So you've got this if you want to take a look at it on a later time. All right, as it says. Now, one thing you may or may not have noticed, but our app.js file was getting pretty big. Imagine that we had a site with 10 pages in it. That app.js file then is going to end up being probably well over 100 lines. So typically, the app.js, rather than putting the routes in there like we've done so far, we typically move those routes out. And those routes become controllers that go in a routes folder. We'll get to that, just not for a bit. All right. So as it says, routes are used to divert users to different paths. So when you make a request by putting something into your browser window, all right, the system's going to go out and look for a route that matches that. All right, this was the Express.js website. We've talked about that already. That's npmjs. No, I don't know. But it's from Express, and it's fast, and it's unopinionated, and it's minimalist. We talked about that before. All right, so I went back and rewrote some of this stuff using Express. So this looks more like the one we did. Again, maybe not exactly, but fairly similar. Notice here, all right, the .listen, that actually right there, that .listen goes with the app.get. I could have put app.listen there too. All right. But this is pretty much the one that we wrote when we first started today. And again, you'd run it. All right, so this is everything. Setting the port, requiring Express, setting that app, setting our get route, listening on the port, etc. All right. This gets into talking about using Express with static files. This is what we did right before our last break. I'm not going to read to you. All right. But again, it is standard practice to keep all of your HTML files, all of your CSS files, all of your JavaScript files, and I mean client-side JavaScript, in a folder called public. Once we get going in a little more, all right, there's even more to it than that. I don't want to get into that right now. But have you ever noticed that if, you know, it's kind of a pain that if, let's say we have a website like the one we looked at with 3 pages in it. All right, we've got, we had index.html, we had about.html, and we had contact.html. Now they were simple pages, so I made the index and copied it to the other 2. No big thing. But wouldn't it be nice that all that code we have up at the top, and let's assume for a second rather that we have what am I looking for? That we basically set up a navigation bar. There would be a lot of code that we'd be replicating. Wouldn't it be nice if we could write all of our header section code and all of our footer section code one time and then just bring it into the 3 files? That's what we're going to get to fairly soon. All right. So this tells you how to do the public thing. All right. And how you use the send file. So it was the same one that I used. All right. What the app.use does, what this does, etc. So it's all explained in here. All that did was I had a picture of a dog and it brought it up. All right. With routing, as it says, routing refers to endpoints. What's an endpoint? It's the final destination. So it basically, for lack of better words, it is something you put into your browser window, either as a URL or a URI that requests something from the server. All right. And again, as we mentioned, there's gets, there's posts, there's puts, there's deletes, and there's patches. All right. Again, routing methods specify a callback function. Callbacks can be a straight callback, or they can be a promise, or they can be async await. So whenever you hear callback, it can be any one of those 3. But as it says, when you route, the application listens for requests that match the route, and then it does what you've told it to do. All right, you can do multiple things in here if you need to. And again, you'll notice I've got links again down here for all this stuff. Here are some of the ones that you can use. All right, notice res.download. We could have done that. That would have prompted us. And then we could have chose, for example, index.html. I showed you the res.end. All right, notice there's a res.json. That's if you want to send something back in a JSON format. So in a key value type of format. There's JSON P. The P in there is for padding. All right, and it's JSON padding support. I'm not going to get into that right now. And there's a redirect. I've given you examples of the redirect before. And if you don't have one, it used to be back in the olden days, like about 10 or 15 years ago, that if you wanted to get to the Java website, you typed in java.sun.com. But since they've been bought by Oracle, if you type in java.sun.com into your browser browser window and you hit enter, it redirects you to an Oracle file. Here's some more: rendering, sending, send file, send status. So that status would be like a 200 for succeeds, a 400 for an error on the client side, a 500 for an error on the server side, etc. And again, if you want some more, you can go look at the stuff I put in here. We will use Express Router. Don't worry about what that means right now. All right. But when we say this, we're not going to say app equals Express. We're going to say router equals Express Router. Why? It'll make more sense when we start pulling those routes away, when we start pulling them out of app.js and we start putting them into their own files. All right, so I'm just going to hold off on that until then, because here's an example of it. If you want to see it, there's an example. All right. All right, so that's the third one. I think there's 5, so I'm going to do these last 2. I've got 8 minutes. I may not be that good, but you are, so we can do that in 8 minutes. Then we're taking a break. In fact, let me bring that file up first. Oops. Everything I'm showing you right now, too, you have all of it. So all of this stuff that I've shown you, all right, you've got it all, is what I'm saying. All right, let me change set my share here. Hopefully on your screen now you can see the first slide, Unit 01, Intro to Node.js, Part 4. Hopefully that's what you see on your screen. All right. So here's a little bit about RESTful APIs. That's how we started today. All right. So here is REST defined. I'm not going to go over that because we already went over that article today. This will be similar to what we looked at today. The verbiage will be a little different, but the ideas will be the same. Like they talk about stateless operators in here. We already mentioned that. You already know what an API is. I've given you examples of that as well. All right. And this is a REST server. Okay, it says the next 20 slides. All right, it says shown below. They're not repeated over and over again. Okay. So these are the get, the put, the delete, and the post. We already mentioned those. This is what a web service is. What is a web service? That is something that basically you're providing a service to people over the internet. And there's all sorts of things you can do as a service. All right, you might have heard like something AAS, which means as a service. So there is an example in here. I'm not going to go through it right now, but if you want, there's a REST example in here, and it brings in the file system and Express. All right, so it says based on the information, provide the following. So in other words, allow you to do a get, allow you to do a post, allow you to do a delete, etc. Why am I not going over these right now? Because I don't want to confuse people and deluge you on day 6 with tons of information. Maybe that's right, maybe that's wrong. I don't know, but that's the decision I made. All right. This program, you can actually run it. You actually have all of the programs that I put in here are actually in that folder that I gave you that have the PowerPoints in them. So if you run this, okay, they've got a bunch of users. There's 3, and I ripped this off from the internet, but there's 3 users, Mahesh, Suresh, and Ramesh. All right, and each user has a name, a password, a profession, and an ID. All right, so when you go through this, what that does is that's a JSON file. You read that information in. Okay, now anywhere that you look up here that it says var, shame on your dumb instructor, those should have all been const. You should never, ever, ever use var anymore. All right. But when you run that, you'll be able to run through this. And here's an example where you'll be able to add a new user. You'll be able to change the value of an existing user. You'll be able to print out the values of all users. You'll be able to print out the value of just one user. So again, the idea behind all of this, all right, the idea behind all of this is we are getting to where we'll be writing our own API, our own application program interface. So you see there's another read file where we're reading it in. There's a bunch of stuff in here, and I tried to put it in here and then give you an explanation of what was going on. All right, you'll notice here they talk about the fetch API. If you remember last week, we first looked at the XML HTTP request object when we did the first iteration of that numbers API. I don't think that's ever really used in Node. Node used to use fetch for almost everything. It doesn't use fetch as much anymore. Rather, it uses a package called Axios, AXIOS. You can still use fetch. All right, but the preferred way of doing this is to use Axios. Typically, like if you say, well, why is that the preferred? Typically, it's because it'll run faster. All right. So if you want more on fetch, you can look at that example. All right, and then finally, let me look at the last one that's in here. So let me bring that up. I got to change my share. I know that. So this last part is part 5. This is the last part that's in here. All right. And again, we will do this fairly quickly. I've got 2 minutes. All right. This
looks like the share just went away.
Okay.
It came and went.
All righty. I appreciate you letting me know when it does, because this one we don't have to really even talk about. I put this in there because this is the stuff, most of it is the stuff we had in the AWD1111 class. Validation using HTML, using words like required, etc. Validation using JavaScript. You just did that. And we even did some jQuery in there. You can do a minimum of validation using Bootstrap. All right. But there is also validation you can use using Happy Joy. All right. And that literally is, all right, that is a node package. So I'm going to skip forward validation from HTML, JavaScript. This is all stuff you've done before. jQuery, Bootstrap, that'd be Bootstrap 5 now, but when I did it, 4 was what was up there. So that brings us to right here, using HapJoy. All right. This is a way, this is a package, the Joy package, JOI, that you can use to provide validation on your pages. This is by no means the only way to do it. When we get into, for example, when we are working with MongoDB, we're not going to use Joy. We're going to use kind of the built-in schema validation that exists in MongoDB, but this is just an example of what you can do. All right, so you can run through that if you're so inclined, if you have an interest in doing that. The last thing that's in there is deploying apps on Heroku. Again, I've got another email into them saying, hey, you said that you're going to have a rollout on this in September. When's it going to be? Because if it's September 1st, that's next Thursday. All right. If it's September 29th, it's 4 weeks from next Thursday. And if it's going to be 4 weeks, I don't want to use this. We're going to have to find a different package. But if you want a little reading on what Heroku is, it's right in here. All right. So it is now 3:01. Let's take a little bit longer, please, and let's come back at 3:15. All right. And we'll pick it up there. Questions? All right. I'll see you at 3:15 then. Hmm. All right, it's 3:10, so I'm going to start back up again. And I will tell you, I want to go over a bunch of this stuff. I mentioned at the beginning of class that hopefully you can see right now the folder that says Traversy MySQL. These are 8 years old, but the problem is I've got them separated into 32 different units, and I don't feel like between now and 4 o'clock doing 32 different screen share changes. That's just ridiculous. So what I'm going to do between today and tomorrow is I'm going to combine this into one presentation. So what we're going to do then instead right now is one of the other things that's in here is you've got a file that's called MySQL sample database.sql. All right. It is, if you grab the GitHub repo I put there and you pulled it down, you've got that file. We're going to see if we can bring that in right now. So we've got a database that we can work with. So what I would like you to do, please, and I'm going to have to change as well. All right. But what I would like you to please do is I mentioned the other day that I wanted you to make sure that you had XAMPP loaded on your machines. So what I would like you to do is to go out and bring up XAMPP, and that should look like this on your screen. Hopefully you can see my XAMPP window right now. And remember, when this comes up, technically when we loaded it, we didn't really even need FileZilla and Mercury and Tomcat. We could have left those out of the install, but I just told you to accept all the defaults. So to start this up, you click on the Start for Apache, and it should turn green. You click on the Start for MySQL, and it should turn green. Now, when we do this, there's two ways that we can actually run information in here. We can click over here where it says shell, and that'll bring up a window which you may or may not be able to see. It doesn't matter, all right, because I'm not going to use that way. But you can bring that up, but that's using a command line, and it's a little bit tougher. It's not that it's terrible, but we're not going to use that. Instead, I want you to go in and on the same line as MySQL, click by admin right there. And that should bring up PHP my admin. Now, it is possible that I'm going to have to do another screen share here. So there is PHP my admin on the screen right now. Okay. And usually I can move that over. I don't know why that is so big, but it is. It shouldn't be that wide. The point though is this. I don't have it on here. Okay. But I'm going to attempt to take that database that I just mentioned to you that I put in the GitHub repo for today. And I want you to follow my lead here. We're going to see if we can import it and create a brand new database without having to type in anything, just doing a bunch of clicks. So what I'd like you to do, please, is click on import up on the top here. Click on import. Why is it doing that? Okay, that'll work. All right, and when you click on import, it's going to look something like this. All right, my thing on the side, it's just too big. So I just removed it. All right, so it says, what file do you want to import? All right, so I'm going to click browse or choose file, browse your computer, choose file. And over on my desktop, where I put that GitHub repo, all right, I'm going to find Monday, 8/29/2022, and underneath there, I'm going to find the file that is called MySQL sample database.sql. So I'm going to highlight that file and then just click open. And that should change it. You should see it here. Notice the maximum size that you can use to hold this is 40 meg. That sure shouldn't be an issue for us. And you'll also notice it would even work if you've got a zip file. It'll unzip it for you. We don't have to do that. The character set should remain at UTF-8. That's good. All right. So we don't want to do a partial import. The format we want is SQL. So we should just be able to arrow down to the bottom here and click on the word go. Oh, great. It says import has successfully finished. 36 queries executed, but now it's coming back and it's saying foreign key constraint is incorrectly formed. So we'll have to check on that, but I want to see if it did create this. If it worked, you should now have a folder that's called Classic Models. All right, that's the new database, Classic Models. And I'm looking on there, and of course it made the database, and it looks like there's nothing at all in it. Isn't that fan-frickin-tastic? All right, so it didn't like those errors that were in there. I should have tried it first, and I didn't. I just took for granted that it would work. All right, well, okay, we're going to change gears just a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over that article that talked about this. It's just a very short article. Oh, great. Okay, then we got to do it this way. That's not a problem. Not a problem. All right. Please tell me if I'm mistaken. Otherwise, say nothing. You have showing on your screen right now a Word document that at the top says MySQL sample database. If you have that, say nothing. If you don't, say something. All right, that's where this database is from. I found it online. We could have used any database we wanted to. All right. But evidently there's something in the way they made the foreign keys that screwed it up. I'll try to fix it by tomorrow. If I can't, if I have to grab another database, I'll do that. I don't care. But what I want to do for tomorrow, for part of the period at least, is I want to give you a database. This one was kind of nice. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 tables, and this is the setup. All right. Anything that you see in here, these are all one-to-many relationships. Okay. That's the one side, that's the many side. So you can see, one customer can have 0, 1 or more orders, etc. All right. So it says you can download the sample database, ER diagram, etc. Well, that was that, but there was also the database itself. That's where I took this from. All right. And that's what I gave you. I don't know why it didn't work, but I'll have something for tomorrow. So tomorrow, what I'm going to do is I am going to first go over those traversy things, and we're going to talk about MySQL. It may have been a while for some of you since you looked at MySQL, but everyone in the class who's in this class had me for C# to my knowledge. So you've all had an introduction to MySQL. So we're going to do that, and then I'm going to have a list of queries that I want you to do. All right. And there'll probably be like 25 of them. In fact, there might be 30, and the first 4 or 5 we'll do together. But the other ones are going to be assigned to you. So we will talk tomorrow about this. and then I will give you some time to work on those. All right. In addition to that, you're going to have, yes, another assignment. And what is that other assignment? I want to show you that right now. I wanted us to be able to go out and do the equivalent of build a bookstore. All right, like our own online kind of little bookstore where you'd be able to buy things and whatever. And I thought, well, it would be kind of nice if we did that, if we would do books that were relevant to what we're working on. So I found this site online that's called readthistwice.com, and it lists what they consider to be the 29 best books there are on Node. So what I'm going to want you to do for each one of these books, you can see there's a picture, there's a title, there is some kind of a description. All right. There is a date it was published, there is an edition, etc. But by looking through what's in here and going out to Amazon, because the magic page in Amazon is down towards the bottom, they've got some stuff in here like what edition the book is, etc. So between that and also looking on where it says view details, so you can have when it was published, a rating for the book, the ISBN, etc. I'm going to want you to create a schema with X number of tables in it. Now, could you put everything in one table? Probably, but you sure as heck wouldn't want to do that. You're going to want a multiple number of tables. So I want you to do this, and I'll want you to do this by Sunday, and I'm going to give you lab time to work on it, not just Friday, but you're going to have at least an hour Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday to work on it too. All right. But I want you to set something like this up so that what we can try to do either by the end of this week or probably more than likely next week is we can try to create an API for this where we will be able to run a program that we write and we will be able to list all of these books if we just do a get, or if we do a get with an ID, we will be able to list just a single book. If we do a put or a patch, it'll bring up a single book because we'll do that with an ID. And we will be able, so if we spelled, I don't know, we put a wrong ISBN in or a wrong something else in, we'll be able to change that. All right. And we'll be able to post, meaning we'll be able to add a new book if we want to do that. And finally, we'll be able to delete because I want us to be able to do all of that stuff. All right. So the idea is we're going to start by writing our own API. Then eventually we will do some work where we will be grabbing information from an existing API. All right. So give me a second here. There it is. All right, let me change my share one more time here. So this is going to be your assignment. Number or part 0, it didn't work, so I'll have to fix it. We will collectively import the database schema you were sent today. That didn't work. So either I have to fix it or find a different database schema for you to import. So you will have this homework will be due this Sunday, along with your gym website. So part 1, it'll say create the queries based on the schema as shown in the handout. I have started on that, but I haven't finished. I hope to get it done tonight, between tonight and give it to you tomorrow. There'll be 25 queries you'll have to answer. Some of them will be designed to really make you think. All right. And the second one, as it says, create the schema, database, and records for the following. You are going to open up a bookstore which will eventually sell these 10 types of books. So far, the only books you've gotten are 29 different information technology books from the URL I just showed you. All right. So what I will want you to do is to create a database schema. In other words, set up the database, set up the tables. For each table, give them sensible field names, give them sensible field types, and then populate those tables with the data from that database. And as it says on the bottom, this will take some time, but that's what I did last night. It's in here someplace. Not there, that's a different schema. It's not there. There. So I did that, several hundred lines. So again, I just want to make sure you hear this one more time. By tomorrow, it is my responsibility to get you a database schema we can import. Once we have imported that, then I'm going to use that in conjunction with that material from Brad Traversy that I mentioned to you. And I might have to flip back and forth, but it'll only be flipping back and forth between 2 shares and not 32 shares. All right. And then once we get done with that, you will have some time. Like I said, we will go over a couple of those queries on this sheet as a class, and then I will assign the rest of them. All right. And you can also go in and start, you can go out to that site with these 29 books and start figuring out what your schema will be. All right. Does anyone have any questions on anything we've gone over today? Like I said, in a way, it seems like we're walking down 2 different roads. We're walking down the one road with Node and the other road we're just starting on now with MySQL. Eventually, those roads will converge into a single road, and we will do a Node.js app that will have MySQL capability in it. And speaking of that, just so you know, no one's asked. You may have thought of this before. You may not have thought of this before. But where are we? Once we get back into here, all right, and we start looking at the different stuff that's in here, and I go back into the npmjs.org, all right, .com it really is, but it pushed me there, okay? When I search in here, guess what they have? They've got a MySQL package, all right? And as it says, it's going to be basically a driver that you can use MySQL along with Node.js. Notice again, it's got its own GitHub repo. It's got its own page underneath there. All right. And again, I think I might have even shown you this last week. That's 95,000. So just about 1 million downloads. We will work with that. Then when we get done with that, we will come in and we will look at MongoDB. All right. And with MongoDB, you're going to find that there's 33.6 million downloads. And when we use MongoDB, we're going to use that. It's a little more complex to use than MySQL. So we're going to use that in conjunction with another package. It's a part of Mongo that's called Mongoose. And you'll notice when I look there and I bring that up, that's got almost 2 million downloads. So we are going to be using software that is well documented, that is well tested. And if you want to go out and start looking at some stuff, maybe you do, maybe you don't. Notice the official documentation for Mongoose is at mongoose.com. And these documents are pretty good. You're going to start to see when you look through it, these are just some of the people using those. But when you go through there and you go to, I don't know if it was a quick start guide or not, but they will give you examples on how we're going to do all this stuff. We may not follow them exactly, all right, but we're going to follow them pretty much. And in the same way, if we go back in here and we look at MongoDB, you're going to find the official MongoDB driver, but somewhere in there, they're going to give you the page for finding out about Mongo. All right. And there's some really good stuff in here. So we're going to start working with it this way. All right. Okay. I'm just going to stop right here, and I'm going to spend the last half hour I've got looking for a different database for us or seeing if I can fix this one. All right. So that's it for today. It sounded like there were no questions. All right. I will talk to you tomorrow. Have a good rest of the day.